Good morning. Welcome to our Sunday Social Justice Hybrid Service. We are in person and on Zoom. My name is Rachel Daniels. I'm your worship associate, and I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. My pants are fitting a little bit tighter. The opening music video is a song called Medication by two of Bob Marley's sons. The message is fairly obvious and one that's important to this day. Marijuana is medicine. And that's just what the music video pointed out. And yet it's still criminalized. The federal government and many states still do not recognize the medicinal value of marijuana, let alone talking about the recreational value. And too many victims of the war on drugs remain in US prisons. Law enforcement is particularly predatory on people of color, as you can tell by our prison population makeup. Our expert and returning guest speaker, Kandice Hawes, founder and director of OC NORML, will be filling us in later on the state of cannabis. And in talking to Kandice this morning, this is Kandice's fourth time coming back to speak to us. Welcome, Kandice. It's great. Everywhere on Sunday mornings, Unitarians locally, nationally, and globally light the chalice to open our worship space. If you're at home and you have a candle nearby, please light it if you feel to join us. And Brian, my wonderful husband, will light our chalice here in our sanctuary. And then for our chalice lighting words today, we are going to read them all together. And the words will be on your screen. There are 3 slides that show our chalice lighting words. Okay. And together, and if you're on Zoom, please unmute. We light our chalice
this morning
as a
reminder that in the face of improbable odds, life's embers burn and glow brightly.
This chalice illuminates every speck of dust in ourselves, in the visible and invisible world, the planets, the sun, and stars, in the joyous dance of atoms, in the laughter of the heavens, rippling through the universe. Spirit,
in this spirit, we light our chalice, celebrate our existence in this time and space together.
Each Sunday service is a collective effort, from scheduling the speakers to making coffee, taking care of the building, beautiful music, running sound and PowerPoint, and having a dedicated board and worship committee, and all of you who choose to attend. And yet there's always more to do. So if anyone wants to get involved in anything else, just reach out. Our community is small. We welcome everyone. We're small, vibrant, and passionate. Don will be putting up a slide that shows our upcoming services. On December 4th, which is next week, we have Lawrence Ingalls. He's also a returning guest speaker. The title of his service is The Boys of Decades Ago, and he'll be exploring traditional male roles in today's changing world. And then right after the service, we have a congregational meeting. Then on the 11th, we have Don West Jr. And Don is one of our super gifted and inspiring speakers. So this is a service that you want to be present for. And then another incredible speaker, Reverend James Ford. He combines Unitarianism and Buddhism, bringing us newly discovered reverence and joy with his services. And then we have a Christmas casual. So bring a reading, a joke, a story, or just bring yourselves. And then also Christmas Eve, Tapestry will be having services. And so there will be we'll probably be sending out more information on that if you're looking for something to do on Christmas Eve. On our announcements, if you, let's see, every first Thursday of the month, we are involved in feeding the homeless, and it's bring one dish or bread, anything that will help the homeless at the ASL, which is out in the canyon. That's the alternative sleeping location. And Candy or Paul probably have a lot more information than I do. I know Candy is a regular contributor, so is Pam and Dara, so see one of them. Then we have a workshop on affordable housing. That's tomorrow, and it's here in Laguna Beach at the Neighborhood Congregational Church. And Dawn Price will be there. She runs the ASL, and there will be many others that will be there to discuss helping our unhoused neighbors. And as mentioned previously, December 4th, we have a congregational meeting on the revised bylaws. And an e-blast went out, and there'll be another one sent out pretty soon. Then we have a Zoom at noon, which is a discussion group led by Paul Bogdan. And that is every Monday at noon, and it's only by Zoom. And then again, Tapestry is holding services on Christmas Eve. So that should be a lot of fun, a lot of singing, a lot of togetherness as a community, our joined communities. And again, we'll be sending out some information on that. Our main doctrine in Unitarian Universalism is love. We are the church of the open mind, loving heart, and helping hand. We care about you and accept you for who and what you are. We recognize that each of us is on our own unique spiritual journey. We share the values of the 7 principles and for those here in the building, the 7 principles are on the back of your order of service. And if you're joining by Zoom, you can go to any UU Unitarian Universalist website and find the 7 principles. Today's sermon is titled State of Cannabis. And again, we are so pleased to have our returning guest speaker, Kandice Hawes-Lopez, founder and director of Orange County NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, founded in 2003. OC NORML is one of the most active cannabis education and consumer advocacy organizations in the country. Kandice also works with the Glass House Group, which is a vertically integrated cannabis company serving the California markets. I met Kandice a long time ago, 2003, Kandice, or before? Yep, Kandice is nodding her head in agreement around 2003. Kandice helped coordinate numerous protests when I was the regional director of the November Coalition, fighting against the mandatory minimums and lengthy, inhumane prison terms for nonviolent offenders. When Kandice founded OC NORML, she organized an amazing group of educated, passionate rebels who were fighting hard for marijuana decriminalization, as well as raising awareness about the plight of drug war prisoners. My family, like many families, was hit hard by the drug war. My brother was a reggae musician with a music studio in our home. And we had lots of musicians staying at my house, actually my mother's house, our house. My mother supported the arts and she supported musicians. And then this was sort of at the beginning of the drug war, I guess late 80s. And there's lots of marijuana around, you know, reggae musicians, well, maybe musicians in general. And it's really scary at that time to have any marijuana. My brother had this big old red afro. And then later he had long red dreadlocks, and they called them red locks. And we had lots of complaints from our neighbors in Laguna Beach about the Black reggae musicians, the hippie looking long-haired white musicians. And again, it was different times back then. We had the police at our home on many occasions, breaking down the doors, and they broke down the doors even when the doors weren't locked. I mean, it's like, turn the handle. But, and one time after my grandmother died, my aunt sent my mother some cherished items that had belonged to her mother, my grandmother, in big boxes. The police came to the house. They handcuffed everyone. They threw them on the ground. So they were handcuffed on the ground as they began opening boxes. They were sure that they contained a shipment of marijuana, but they didn't. No arrests were made. And, you know, these changing times, I am still in awe of it. I'm in awe when my husband, who spent over 22 years in the federal prison for his very first offense, a nonviolent marijuana-related offense, can now light up a spliff in our car, or you can walk into a dispensary and see the array of products, and loved ones can get pain relief. And Candice was just talking a little bit earlier about that they're still coming up with so many new products like CBN to help you get to sleep. And well, no, it doesn't help you get to sleep. It helps you maintain your sleep through the night. And all of this without going to jail. And all of this progress that we've made, this is thanks to Candice and OC NORML and others like her, and what we've accomplished, all of us, by our votes, by getting involved. And I just have to say that we've changed the world, and yet there's so much more to do. And this morning, Candice will talk about the state of cannabis and the tremendous progress that has been made in cannabis reform, and which issues still remain for our call to action. And then right after Candice gives her presentation, we will have a short Q&A. And we'll do it sort of like we do Joys and Sorrows, where we'll first go to the Zoom people. So if you have questions and you're thinking about it, you might want to go ahead and, you know, put your questions into chat, or Don will highlight you and you can ask your questions. And we'll only do a few of those. And then and here we'll pass around the iPad and we can do Q&A. And so also stay after just for a few minutes, and then Candice can address anything that you may want to ask her on a personal level. Now we have our centering thought, and it will be on the screen. And the centering thought is from Howard Zinn. And please unmute yourselves because we will read this together. Okay. There is no
act too small, no act too bold. The history of social change is the history of millions of actions, small and large, coming together at a critical point to create a power that governments cannot suppress.
Howard Zinn. I think this summarizes our road on cannabis. It's a long road, but we're doing it. Now we turn to our awe-inspiring musical director, Carole, for our opening hymn.
Hello, hello, hello. This song is a new one, everyone. So I'm going to play it through for you first. And actually, there are really only 2 melody lines in the whole piece. So you'll hear one melody line and you'll be singing it 3 times. And then there's a 4th one that is a little different. So hopefully, I forgot to say stand when we start singing, right? Yeah. So I'm just going to play it for you first. That's the main theme. Here's the different one. Main theme. Okay, if y'all want to stand up and sing your hearts out, you might at home want to stay seated. Here we are, ready? Step by step, the longest march can be won, can be won. Many stones can form an arch, singly none, singly. And by union, what we will can be accomplished still. Drops of water turn a mill, singly none, singly none. We're going to repeat this one more time. Step by step, the longest march can be won, can be won. Many stones can form an arch. singly none, singly none. And by union what we will can be accomplished still. Drops of water turn a mill, singly none, singly none.
Beautiful. Thank you, Carole. Now, please. Okay. Now, please unmute and look at the screens, and we'll read a short affirmation together to remind ourselves why we come together. Ready? Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its motto. This is our great covenant to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Now we pause our recording for joys and sorrows. This is a time to share what's going on in your life, a joy that we can celebrate with you, or a sorrow that we can help you share the burden. And if you raise your hand, we'll go to the people on Zoom first. Don will highlight you, and you'll have to unmute yourself to take action fellowship. And one of the ways is your financial support. We'll have a slide up that shows ways to donate. Candy will pass the basket, and Carole will once again touch our heart with her music. And afterwards, we will sing to each other.
Please join me now in singing To You I Receive. From you I receive, to you I give. It's one of those prepositions.
The words will be up there.
Please stand if you want to. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
Now we're going to take a moment to just sort of sit quietly, breathe, a moment of reflection, meditation, prayer, a moment of gratitude. And go ahead and feel your feet on the ground. Place your hands gently in your lap and close your eyes and just take a moment to breathe. Carole will bring us out of the meditation, but right now we're just going to feel our breath reaching down to our toes, up through our head, filling our body, just sending oxygen to every part of our being. Now, bringing us the state of cannabis is our returning guest speaker, Kandice Hawes-Lopez, the founder and director of Orange County NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here today and allowing me to speak to you guys. I really love that meditation. I think I should start all of my presentations with a meditation from this moment forward. Really appreciate you guys having me here, like I said. If you could bring up the slide presentation for me, please. Yes, I remember meeting Rachel the very first days of Orange County NORML, and we were fighting for the release and the change of laws and to stop the discrimination against people that use cannabis, the jailing of people and the separation of families and all the hardships that come with it. So it's such a pleasure to be with you guys again here and to bring you an update on the state of cannabis. Throughout the years, the 20 years that I've been running the chapter, I've come and updated you over time. And so I feel like we're at a really great place. And so I'm happy this time to bring you some good news. Next slide. So Rachel already gave me a wonderful presentation, but just again, I founded the Orange County chapter of NORML when I was just a young college student. I was 22 and I lost my financial aid for a cannabis charge. And I really felt that the laws were unjust and they were harming people in ways that would affect them for their whole life. And so I dedicated my life to changing those laws. And since then I've discovered there's so many different battles and journeys that need to be done in the cannabis space. And so we've continued to work on laws throughout these 20 years and made some great changes in the county. And they also work for a cannabis group that provides cannabis to patients, to seniors, and I really love working with people and helping them discover the benefits of cannabis. Next slide. So today we're going to talk about some of our wins and losses that we've had over the last couple of years since the last time I talked to you guys. I mean, I think the thing that really has put us in a great position for the wins that we've had in this past year is after the COVID outbreak, you know, there was a certain amount of businesses that were deemed to be essential and those that were not. And so I was preparing for a battle and to go to the governor and to fight for cannabis to be deemed as an essential business. But luckily, he already included us in that group and we were able to provide cannabis to people during COVID, which I think brought a lot of relief to people that were stuck in their homes, who wanted to find other ways of medicating themselves and like drugs and alcohol and prescription medications, which I had many friends, unfortunately, during COVID pass away from things like that. So starting with how cannabis is currently, next slide. So this is where we are of right now in the state. We have a new bureau that regulates cannabis in California. It's called the Department of Cannabis Control. So all cannabis licensing, activity, regulation, testing, everything passes through this governmental agency, which created a lot of consistency, a lot of resources and a lot of security for those consumers using cannabis. So as of currently, as of May anyways, the state has issued over 12,000 cannabis licenses to individuals in the state. Of that, about 800 of those licenses are for storefront retail dispensaries. 374 are from licensed delivery businesses. We have 8,600 cultivation licenses. And then again, about 2,800 manufacturing, distribution, and event licenses. This is a large amount of cannabis licenses, but definitely our state can hold more than that. That's one of the issues that we're still dealing with is a lot of cities are not opening their doors to cannabis businesses, but we do have a lot of throughout the state that are allowing it, which has created a lot of great jobs and opportunities. And of course, people are able to come out of the closet into the light, to be proud business owners in the cannabis space, to give legitimate, good paying jobs to other individuals. And again, for us not to have to fear that we use cannabis and to be fear of being put in jail or to even have to hide what we do for a living, we're able to, you know, be productive members of society and we're able to give back to the economy. In the city of Santa Ana this last year, the cannabis industry there, which has 30 dispensaries, raised $20 million in tax revenue. So in that city, we were able to pay for kiosks for students to check out in the library. They bought a brand new mobile library van. They bought a robot that works with autistic kids. So a lot of good has come from cannabis. This city openly says too that cannabis and the tax revenue that they've brought has kept them budget neutral during these challenging past years with COVID. So they have now seen the benefits that cannabis can bring to the society and to also governments and to provide services to people. Within the last year, California collected about $817 million in tax revenue. So that revenue was able to hire new police officers, fund important programs, and to also help fill gaps in service. Next slide. So we had some great wins in this last election, both state, national, and local. In Orange County for the past 6 years, Santa Ana was the only place where people can access legal cannabis. So from all over the state or all over the county, you would have to drive to Santa Ana or get it delivered. Just recently, the city of Costa Mesa allowed dispensaries, and they have their first dispensary that actually opened yesterday, which is pretty exciting, called 420 Central. And then just recently in this election, 2 new cities passed tax measures. So the city of Laguna Woods passed a tax measure which lays the groundwork for the city to come in and to write an ordinance to allow cannabis dispensaries in that city for seniors. Working with seniors over the past 20 years, I've seen that they're a population that could benefit from cannabis very much, you know, with prescription drugs being so easily handed out by doctors. You know, a lot of seniors, unfortunately, are taking these medications, don't understand the side effects and how hard it can be to get off these drugs. So this will be a great benefit to the community, and they hope to have a cannabis dispensary that's staffed and run by the seniors, providing the service to their peers. Also, the city of Huntington Beach just passed a tax measure, and their city council is already working on an ordinance to allow for safe access there. Also, nationwide, we added 2 new states to those that allow for recreational use and ending the imprisonment and the fines and the punishment for those people that use cannabis recreationally. That's Maryland and Missouri. That brings us up to 19 states that allow for the recreational use of cannabis, and 37 plus the District of Columbia that allow for medical use. Thinking back 20 years ago, you know, when me and Rachel first started, I never really thought that we would come to this place where we have more than we don't of states that support cannabis, that I go to city council meetings, and instead of getting, you know, eye rolls and, you know, people saying negative things to me and telling me that this is crazy, this will never happen. You know, now I go to city council meetings and I see public officials, city staffers actually advocating for cannabis and fighting to have this in the city because they now understand the benefit that it can bring. So it's a completely 180-degree change from where we were 20 years ago. I remember when Orange County NORML first started, you know, one of our main activities was advocating for those that had been wrongfully convicted, you know, holding protests when people are in jail, trying to bring awareness to people, going to people's court cases and trying to help convince the juries that these people were providing for medical use. So it's just 180 degrees from where it's been previously. So it's nice to see that we're adding 2 new states to this, and that nationwide the support for cannabis reform is growing. Next slide. Also, we had some great wins this year within California, and our governor Newsom signed 4 bills out of, I actually signed more than that, but these are 4 bills that have the most impact on our on the cannabis industry and the cannabis community and those people that use cannabis in the state. So the first one I want to talk about, I'm really excited about. California NORML has been advocating for this for more than 10 years. Our law provides for access and to cultivate cannabis, but didn't really provide for any protection for consumers in the workplace. So even though you were allowed to use cannabis, some jobs didn't allow you to have it in your system, which kept people from finding new jobs, getting promotions, sometimes even reporting workplace injuries because they're afraid of coming up with cannabis in their drug tests. So just this last year, Governor Newsom, after advocating for this bill, and it actually passed the Senate and the legislature 1 year, and it was on Governor Schwarzenegger's desk, and he has actually vetoed this. So we almost got this bill past the post one time, but it was unfortunately vetoed. Since then, it kind of lost some traction, and we lost some people that were supporters. They retired. But this last year, fortunately, we were able to pass this law. We were just crossing our fingers that Governor Newsom would sign it, and he did. So this is the first bill in California that would actually provide employment protection for cannabis consumers, that you would not be fired from your job or denied employment due to off-site cannabis use. It also changes the way that employers can implement drug tests. They can no longer use urine drug tests, which really test, you know, whether you use cannabis for months in the past, not current usage, and forcing to use methods that actually show current impairment, like impairment testing on a computer screen, or also like an oral swab in the mouth, which more accurately shows whether a person's used cannabis in the last 6 hours, which makes a lot more sense. Another bill that he passed this year was the Paying Patients Bill of Rights. Unfortunately, at NORML, we've heard stories throughout the years of seniors, veterans, and people that are using cannabis or using prescription opioids for conditions with severe pain that had been denied those medications because of their cannabis use. A lot of doctors were fearful that if they were allowing cannabis to be used in conjunction with opioids, they can somehow lose their license or their ability to prescribe these drugs. And so the governor signed a bill this year that would allow doctors to allow patients to use cannabis in conjunction with opioids. And we know there's a lot of people that have conditions that will cause pain for their lifetime, and that they may need to use prescription drugs for many years, and that cannabis can actually help them use less of those drugs, or can keep them from having to increase those amounts of drugs as they use them over time. So this is going to definitely be a great bill that will improve many people's quality of life. Another bill, surprisingly, that people didn't even know was an issue is that veterinarians can now recommend cannabis to pets. In the past, veterinarians were actually excluded from this, and that can actually lose their license for talking about cannabis for pet parents. And there was actually no regulation within the Department of Cannabis Control for pets or regulating pet products. So now we'll have that ability, which there's a lot of people that have found that cannabis CBD is really good for pets, anxiety, pain, around like 4th of July and New Year's Eve, provide a lot of benefit. And then also another bill that Governor Newsom signed was a bill that would set up a process for California to enter into agreements with other states to allow cannabis transactions outside of California. So right now, one of the problems in the market is that there's a big glut in the cannabis market. If you kind of saw in the slide before, we have 8,600 cannabis cultivation licenses and far less retail licenses. So right now, the price of cannabis has dropped. And so those legacy farmers who had been growing cannabis for like generations now are being priced out. They cannot compete with the price of cannabis on the wholesale market nowadays. And so what we really need to support these legacy growers and to keep these families in the industry is to allow cannabis to be sold from California in different parts of the country, so that California cannabis can be sold in Florida and other states that would allow it, you know, once we have federal legalization, and to keep us as like the quality craft cannabis providers of like the whole country. Next slide. Another great thing that happened just recently was that President Biden came out and made a statement that he's going to pardon all federal convictions for simple cannabis possession and review the federal classification of cannabis under the Controlled Substances Act. So this sounds amazing. It is a great step forward, but it really didn't go as far as we were hoping. The group of people that he's actually pardoning is a very small group. It's those who have a federal cannabis possession charge. As you guys probably know, most possession charges happen on the state or the local level. So he's not talking about those individuals. He's talking about people that got cannabis tickets like at federal parks or at border crossings, like those kind of individuals. So I think they said there was like a couple thousand of those folks who will get a federal pardon, which is this is a great step forward though, because I'm sure that it was probably more difficult to get those charges pardoned. There have been some moves to have state cannabis charges remove people's records, but nothing yet in the federal level. So this was a positive movement by him. But again, when I first heard this, I was thinking that maybe he was going to pardon and release all cannabis offenders, which would have been a momentous decision and something that would have affected people very positively across the country. Unfortunately, we're just not there yet. This is a small step forward. But something he also did do that I mentioned is that he did ask for a review of the federal classification of cannabis. Right now, it still is a Schedule I drug, which means it can't be administered by the VA. You can't travel across state lines. You can't have a firearm. There's many things that go along with that. NORML and ASA and MAPS, many different organizations have been suing the government every single year, asking for them to do the same thing, to review the classification. And so we're hoping now that the president has actually asked for this, that we may get some sort of movement. It's important to note though, that we don't want it to be just a Schedule II or III, because that actually places it in the hands of pharmaceutical companies. So if the cannabis industry thinks that we've had a hard enough time fighting against the government where we actually have rights, if this entered into the realm of the pharmaceutical companies, then there would just be lawsuits that the cannabis industry could not come up with the same resources that these pharmaceutical industries could. So what we actually need is for cannabis to be completely descheduled and taken off the Controlled Substances Act. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Next slide. So after talking about those good things that have happened to us. You know, how we've had the decrease in stigma. We have government officials now supporting cannabis. We have the governor coming out and signing bills to protect cannabis consumers. And we've had, you know, states coming on board. We still have a lot of work that needs to be done. There's still many, many, many people that are still incarcerated for cannabis offenses. Some of them that were sentenced before the laws changed. And now we're doing the same thing that people are now doing, but making millions and millions of dollars doing. They were just before their time, and they were providing for patients when it was still very risky. According to the Last Prisoner Project, there's about 22,000 state cannabis prisoners and about 10,000 prisoners serving time at the federal level. It costs between $31,000 and $60,000, you know, an affordable college tuition, each year to put one of these individuals in jail, not to mention all the harm that's being done to their families. It just doesn't seem right. And it's still surprising that we have so many people in jail. There's great work being done by the Weldon Project and the Last Prisoner Project. This individual being shown in the picture is Angelo Weldon. He was sentenced to 60 years for a cannabis crime. He was luckily pardoned by President Trump. And some people, you know, do not blame them for it at all. After they're released, you know, they just want to turn the page, start a new chapter in life and like move forward. And they don't want to ever think about, you know, that horrible experience that took so many years from them. But he's actually dedicated his life to freeing all of his fellow individuals that are still incarcerated for cannabis offenses. Before he was arrested, he was a rapper working with like Snoop Dogg and a lot of individuals in that community. And I feel like that was why he was persecuted and he was chosen. But he's now come around and he's dedicated his life. He's had a lot of great successes. Just recently, they had a symposium in Washington, D.C., bringing to the attention of our elected officials how many people are still incarcerated for cannabis. And I think that may have to do with President Biden's recent announcement. The symposium that he held was moderated by James Cole, our former Attorney General. So it's nice to see that our highest elected government officials are now opening their eyes to this issue, and we hope to see reform. So some of the guys that we try to advocate for, and you know, they're really serving sentences that are unjust and way too long, is one fellow named Luke Scarmazzo. He was, again, like I said, he ran a cannabis dispensary for patients before the laws had changed, and he was out there taking a risk to help those that needed it medically. He's already served 14 years in jail. He isn't scheduled to be released for another 5 years, and we've put in a lot of pressure on our governor and on the president to give him a pardon. He has a daughter that he's missed almost completely all of her life, if you can see. She wants him home, and there's no reason why he should be in jail. He's, you know, not a threat to society, and he needs to be released, and so we're advocating for him. Another gentleman is Parker Coleman. He was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison, and he actually has another 30-year consecutive sentence for guns charges. I guess he had a gun with him at the same time. And so this is a case that's getting a lot of attention. Glass House Group, where I work, is actually founded by a retired law enforcement individual. His name is Kyle Kazan. And so he's gone on talk shows and on news shows like CNN and such and saying, you know, why am I, a white man, able to make millions of dollars every single year, where this gentleman, who there's not even any evidence that he sold marijuana, he's in jail, you know, for another 30 years. It doesn't make any sense, you know. This is discriminatory. It just doesn't make any sense. He has a family as well. He needs to be released to his family, and that we need to end these mandatory long-term sentences for cannabis possession. They've already filed a clemency request with the president. And so you can actually sign this on the Last Prisoner Project. You can sign one on the Weldon Project, and you can also send your own individual letter as well. We also had some losses in this recent election. The states of Arkansas, North Dakota, and South Dakota all turned down their cannabis legalization measures. This is largely due to like the lower voter turnout because this was a non-presidential election. Also, there was strong opposition from prominent conservative voices who were really against this measure. The legalization efforts in Arkansas faced heavy opposition from groups like the Arkansas Family Council Action Committee, which worked with former Vice President Mike Pence to encourage citizens to vote no on the measure. Also in South Dakota, Governor Kristi Noem followed suit in the campaign ads warning about the dangers of legalizing marijuana. So unfortunately, we did not win those 3 states, but when I actually talked to one individual from Arkansas as well, and she said that the bill wasn't really the best bill. It was, you know, didn't really include the input of like the whole community. It was very serving like a certain segment of that community. A big company that was there is trying to come in. And so sometimes it's just not the right law either. Here in California, we tried for 4 times before we passed Prop 64. So it's always a step forward, even though they didn't pass this time. You know, they've now opened more people's eyes to cannabis, and that they will probably come back in another couple of years with a different law backed by different individuals. Next slide. And then another big issue still in Orange County and across the whole state is that there's still a lot of cannabis access deserts. So there's still a lot of area where the gray market is filling in, where people see that there's a need in this community. The government is not, or the elected officials are not willing to bring in a cannabis dispensary in, but there's still people that need it. So they're still taking that risk to fill that gap. And that's where the issue is right now. The cannabis industry is kind of struggling because there's such a strong gray market, but there's such a strong gray market because the government officials aren't really helping the cannabis industry thrive. So right now there's only 44% of the counties and cities that allow at least one type of cannabis business. So this could be just like testing or manufacturing. And only 39% of cities allow retail cannabis dispensaries. Like I said, the only one in Santa Ana or in Orange County was Santa Ana for many years. So like I said, this creates like a patchwork of areas where it's legal and not legal to have a cannabis business. There's a lot of customers who don't even understand the differences. And so, you know, they go into a facility that looks really nice in the city of Anaheim, and they assume that they're at a legal cannabis business and that they're buying products that are tested, that are consistent, and that they're, you know, paying taxes that are being delivered to the state and supporting programs. But they're not, you know, and it's hard to actually tell in a lot of cities. And so there's a thriving cannabis market in a lot of cities where people are not getting quality tested product. A lot of people nowadays also think that if you buy cannabis in the gray market, that you're actually saving money. But on the illegal market, prices have come down a lot. It's very competitive, and that people can actually get the same better quality product for sometimes the same or even less in a dispensary. But I don't think the state has done much to actually educate people on the difference between what is a legal operator, what is an illegal operator, and given those illegal operators a pathway to success, it still costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars to open a cannabis business. So that barrier to entry is very high, and that's why we still have this thriving illegal cannabis market. There are some businesses that have opened locally that try to give, you know, minority-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, you know, small operators a chance to compete. There's a facility called Mind Green Network in Santa Ana, which is pretty cool. It's a shared kitchen. So individuals can come in and just rent hours to produce as many products as they need to sell. And then as they scale up, they can rent more hours. And so it gives people a way to enter at, you know, much lower costs. And so that's what we're hoping to do, is support these kind of programs, educate people on how they can get into the legal market and to be able to provide legal income to get themselves out of that criminal justice kind of system. And it's estimated, like I said, that 70% of cannabis is still sold outside dispensaries, which is pretty alarming, but it makes sense. I talked to a lot of people that consume cannabis, and not a lot of them buy from licensed dispensaries. You know, they're either growing it their own, which is great, and all adults in California are allowed to grow 6 plants. But, you know, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done there with the Bureau of Cannabis Control. We need to have better commercials. We need to have, you know, better programs to get everybody involved in the legal side of the market. Next slide. And like I said, cannabis is still a Schedule I drug, which is just amazing after all the anecdotal information that we have from people that have used it successfully, to the research that's now being done, to pharmaceutical companies that are now coming out with their own derivatives. It just makes no sense that cannabis is still a Schedule I drug. This is probably the last big barrier that we need before cannabis is completely free, to the point where people don't have to worry about being incarcerated for cannabis anymore. They don't have to worry about losing their families. They don't need to worry about losing their jobs. Things have come very, very far in the last 5 years. You know, I'm very happy to say, you know, that we have more states coming on board, that we have these laws that protect us, and that it is becoming easier, but it's not completely all the way there. And so next slide. My call to action to you guys is to support the cannabis prisoners' petitions for clemency, if you have a moment, to advocate for cannabis regulation in your city, and to support a pathway for legal operators to gain licensing, and also to support the nonprofits that work towards reform. Groups like the November Coalition, Orange County NORML, California NORML, they've all lost a lot of funding and a lot of activists in the last year due to COVID. So we're all trying to, you know, get back together and to strategize. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And we're going to continue on that fight. Next slide. And then if anybody has any questions, we can answer them now, or if you want, you could always contact me directly, either by email or by phone, and I can answer anything for you. Anybody have any questions? On Zoom or in person? Yes. 1 second, we're going to bring the iPod.
Thank you. Thank you. What do you know, if any, about this new, like engineered Delta 8 versus Delta 9? Delta 8, I believe, is derived from CBD.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, there has been a lot of the increased Delta 8 in a lot of products, like not so much in the dispensary side, but on the, I would say like the gray market. Not so much like the illegal dispensaries, but a lot of shops now have started adding Delta 8 into their products. As you said, Delta 8 is something that you can extract from CBD. It's non-psychoactive, but it can give you like a calming effect. So a lot of people will add Delta 8 to CBD products to give like a little bit of boost. CBD alone has like no psychoactive effects, so you don't really feel like a head change. But when they add the Delta 8 in, it does kind of give them like a calming effect. It doesn't feel like being high like on cannabis. It's like much more mellow than that. But they are using it a lot more often. And a lot of products sold in the smoke shops. It's not something that's regulated. Right now, the cannabis industry is not allowed to incorporate CBD derivatives or products right now. So you don't see a lot of Delta 8 in cannabis products that are regulated. But like I said, they are adding it to CBD products to kind of give them like a boost. And so it does have some, I think, pain numbing. Sorry. I was told not to do that and I did it. I apologize. I don't have a lot of experience with Delta 8 though, personally, because I have access to a lot of high quality cannabis. I haven't really experimented with that yet, but I know there are a lot of people that use CBD products because they can't use THC products due to work. And so some of them will use like the CBD with the Delta 8 because they get a little bit more effect from it. The state is going to start regulating the CBD products. More similar to the way that they do with cannabis. Right now, there's no regulation of the CBD market. It's considered an herbal supplement. Same thing as like Delta 8 is like an herbal supplement. It's not regulated. And so the products, there's no requirement for packaging or like there's no testing to guarantee like what people say is in the bottle is actually in the bottle, but that's going to be changing soon. And they're going to be requiring them to label, to test, and to package similar to cannabis products. And then eventually they will allow the CBD products to be integrated into the cannabis market. But Delta 8 is kind of like a workaround right now. Any other questions?
I have a question for you, Candice. I'm curious if you have any information on the possibility for any impacts on funding for research in terms of medical use of cannabis. And my understanding is there has been sort of a ban on their ability for federal funding to be used for medical research for, you know, potential real valuable uses for cannabis. And I just wondered whether you had any information or updates on these possibilities or if there are still barriers there.
Yeah, definitely. There definitely are some barriers there. At the state level though, Prop 64 and the wording did allocate some of the tax money to research. And so that research is accessible to public universities. So like UCI, UC San Diego, they're all doing research right now on cannabis. UCI actually has an interdisciplinary cannabis committee, I guess you would call it. I forget the last word of it. And they have department heads from all the different schools within the university working together. It's actually spearheaded by Dr. Andrew Pimenelli. who is a researcher that works with researchers in Israel on cannabis research. So they are doing some research studies. It's not really on medical use, and like they're not experimenting with patients, so to speak. They're working with animals. They're also doing a lot of research on like societal and governmental aspects, the financial aspects of cannabis. I've recently spoke to researchers from like UC Berkeley, who's doing something about the effects of like the illegal market and the regulated market, on like the sociology behind like the legalization and how that's changed the society. But there still is a barrier to testing because of the federal government, and that the DEA and NIDA has to approve this research. Dr. Sue Sicily has broke down some of those barriers, and she has been allowed to do research on veterans. And so she's the first person that I know of right now that's actually using human subjects. But it's hard with what we're given right now. The only cannabis that's being allowed to be used for these research studies is grown by the University of Mississippi. And their cannabis that they use tested about like 10%, which on the market, we're seeing cannabis, testing like 30 to 40% now. So, what they're basing their tests on is not really comparable to like what we actually have available to us. So I'm thinking that, the results that they get will probably not produce the same kind of results that we see on the streets, but that's something that we're always pushing for. And with complete legalization, that would remove all those barriers of entry. And that's always something that I say that I'm looking forward to the most, to that day when we have, all the cannabinoids, we know exactly what each one does. And we can tell somebody, you have ALS, you need this cannabinoid, this much, this many times a day, instead of what we have right now, which is a lot of trial and error. People that want to use cannabis have to try a couple different things. They have to like try different dosages until they find what's best for them. So I look forward to that day when we have more research.
In your opinion, once it's off of all the schedules, do you think doctors are going to stop testing for it in order for us to get our pills?
Yeah, I mean, once it's not a scheduled drug, it'll be the same pretty much as if, you're using alcohol or tobacco. You might have missed it, but the governor actually had a bill this year, the Patients Bill of Rights, that will go into effect January 1st, that says that doctors cannot legally withhold prescription medicines because a person uses cannabis. So that's one of the good things that happened this year for the industry. Paying patients or paying doctors can't hold it against us, and our employers can't hold the fact that we use cannabis against us. It applies to every doctor, but this was mostly a problem within the doctors that prescribed opioids in the pain clinics. So that's something to look forward to. Yeah, well, definitely contact me and I can send you some information on the law and you can provide it to him. Any last questions? All right. Yeah, thank you guys so much for being with us today or letting me speak to you guys.
Okay, now we will have our closing hymn, and if everybody wants to stand, please.
Please join me in this little light of mine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up a world,
Okay, now we're going to extinguish the chalice. And the chalice extinguishing words will be on the screen. So if you want to unmute, we'll also read those together. Okay. We extinguish our chalice, not the light of truth, the warmth
of community,
the fire
of commitment.
These we carry
on in our hearts
until we are together.
until we are together again.
And I will say, Paul, we're going to get in your new car and go to Costa Mesa to the new dispensary. Okay. Now, if you guys can stand, we're going to sing to each other. We join our hearts and ourselves in song, our closing song, and the words again will be on the screen.
Let there be peace on earth. Let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With earth as our mother, we are family. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment